My stalker story. This happened last year, when I was 15. Me and my friends, I call her Kate, were messing around in the neighborhood one day. We were on the side of the road playing around with sparkles and other stuff like that. Suddenly, Kate said to turn around and look behind me. When I looked at the home behind us, I saw someone looking through the window. I couldn't really tell what he looked like, so I just ignored it and turned around. A few minutes later, Kate said to look again. I did, but this time there was a woman with him at the window. They were just staring at us, and I began to feel uneasy. But again, I turned around and ignored them. As the sun went down, I walked back to my house, which was across the street, and Kate went to hers, which was a few blocks away. A couple of hours later, at around 10, my phone lighted up. I was watching Orange is the New Black, so at first I ignored it. Then I got another alert, so I picked up my phone and looked at the screen. My two alerts were from Snapchat. Someone added me and their username was something like Jaden with a few numbers after it, and then they sent me a picture. I waited until the episode was over to open it. It was a black screen with a message saying hey. I ignored that message. Around 6-7 minutes later, I got another Snapchat for the same guy and the same time. It was a black screen saying, why didn't you answer? Again, I ignored the snap and went back to Netflix. When my phone buzzed again, I didn't look at it. Through the episode, I got around 4 more alerts, which I ignored. Then I fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I had 11 alerts. Most of them were black screens saying, why aren't you answering? Or, I know you're awake, answer me. But the last one freaked me out. It was a picture of my house, taken from across the street, with the caption, answer me now. I was stupid, so I didn't screenshot the picture, but I did block him. I didn't hear anything for a few days, but then I got another alert that someone added me. It was the same username as before, but with a 1 after it. Then I got sent multiple snaps. I didn't open any of them because I was in class. 4 hours later, I checked my Snapchat. All the pictures he sent me were pictures of me. Some were during lunch and some were when I was walking home from school. Again, I blocked the user and I didn't get any screenshots. Last night I got a snap of my window, again taken from across the street and from the same user, but this time with a 2 after it. I told my dad and he freaked out and called the police. When they arrived, I told them everything, but they couldn't do anything since I didn't get any screenshots. I don't know what to do. Update. I deleted Snapchat, but he has found me on other social medias. I've blocked him on everything and I'm thinking about deleting everything.
Jure Grando Lilović was a villager from Kringa, the region of Istria in modern-day Croatia, who may have been the first real person described as a vampire in historical records. He died in 1656 due to illness, but according to legend, returned from the grave at night as a vampire and terrorized his village until his decapitation in 1672. The legend tells that for 16 years after his death, Jure would arise from his grave by night and terrorize the village. The village priest, Giorgio, who had buried Jure 16 years previously, discovered that at night somebody would knock on the doors around the village, and on whichever door he knocked, someone from that house would die within the next few days. Jure also appeared to his terrified widow in her bedroom, who described the corpse as looking as though he was smiling and gasping for breath, and then he would sexually assault her. When Father Giorgio eventually came face to face with the vampire, he held out a cross in front of him and yelled, "Behold Jesus Christ, you vampire, stop tormenting us." The bravest of villagers chased and tried to kill the vampire by piercing his heart with a stick, but failed because the stick would just bounce off of his chest. 1 night later, 9 people went to the graveyard, carrying a cross, lamp and a stick. They dug up Jure's coffin and found a perfectly preserved corpse with a smile on his face. Father Giorgio said, "Look, vampire, there is Jesus Christ who saved us from hell and died for us. And you, vampire, you cannot have peace." They then tried to pierce its heart again, but the stick could not penetrate its flesh. After some exorcism prayers, one of the villagers took a saw and sawed the head of the corpse. As soon as the saw tore his skin, the vampire screamed and blood started to flow from the cut. According to tales, peace finally returned to the regions after Jure's decapitation. The Shadow Man. I have few short experience to tell. This all started when I was about 12. I'm 19 now. My sister Zoe, father, stepmother at the time, and her two daughters, Jade my age and Maddie my sister's age, were camping. We had only been there for a day and everything was fine. Then me and my sister decided we were going to go to the stream by ourselves. My father gave us a walkie-talkie so we could keep in contact while we were gone. Now the place we were going to was surrounded by bush, and to go there you had to go down a little path through it. We spent a while with our shoes off and splashing in the water when Jane said she could see someone standing amongst the trees. We all looked and saw a figure. It was black, but you could tell it was the shape of a man. You couldn't see the face. We stared for a few seconds and then he disappeared. We forgot about it and kept playing in the water, but I feel a little bit uneasy. A while later we all looked back, wanting to know if he's still there, and he was. Everything was silent. I could hardly hear the rapids in the little stream. We stopped looking. After about 20 minutes we headed back to the campsite. My sister lingered behind and I was about 20 meters ahead of them, but we couldn't see each other. I heard a twig snap behind me and I turned to look, assumed they had caught up to me. Nope. I turned to see all the dark black figure literally a foot behind me, so I started running. The whole time I could feel him close behind. I ran as fast as I could until I was out in the open campground. He was gone. My sisters came out not long after, and I told them what happened. I asked, but none of them have seen him behind me. They were too far behind and the path was windy, so they were around the corner from me most of the time. Throughout our camping trip, we didn't see him around as much, but occasionally would see him just standing there. Fast forward a couple of years and we go back there, with my father's new girlfriend and her daughter Stella. I can't recall this trip as much, but I know for a fact that Stella saw him too. 3 years ago I started seeing him at my effing house, just anywhere and everywhere really. One day I was in a backyard and I started to lean down to pet my cat, when in my peripheral vision I saw him right behind me. I ignored him as he never really done anything harmful yet. Look slowly at my cat as to block him out. As I do, I feel a hand grab my hair and tug. I immediately spun around. Nothing there. I F off inside and I was a bit spooked. I now live with my boyfriend and can't say 100% if I seen it again. I sometimes see shadows move behind me in the reflection of the TV, but when I look behind me there's nothing, so I just chuck it up to the trick of the light. I did hear something recently. This is the most recent event I had. My boyfriend's alarm went off for work, waking me up too. He switched it off but lay in bed a bit longer. I was awake then, facing my boyfriend's back, one eye closed and it was smooshed against the pillow. Suddenly, I shit you not, I hear someone whisper my name in my ear. It was so clear and I could even feel cold breath on me. I sat up and said to my boyfriend, "Did you say my name?" He looked confused. He was just sitting there playing on his phone. No, he said, he hadn't, which I believed, because it was a female voice. This doesn't really relate to my other experiences, but I thought I'd throw it in anyway.
I saw a ghost in my bedroom. Just to let readers know, I'm a female. It was Thursday and I had an alarm for 6 a.m. because I had school. I woke up to my alarm blasting in my ear. I grabbed my phone and turned the alarm off. I was awake now and was glued to a bed, so I decided to go on Instagram. That's when I saw it. Someone standing 1 foot away from me. My vision was a bit blurry, but I could see what she was wearing. She had a long hair and a nightgown with the flowers. Her legs were so pale. She was in front of my brother's bed, moving side to side gently while looking at me. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. I went under my covers and started rubbing my eyes, and when I accidentally scratched myself, that's when I realized I wasn't dreaming. I pulled my covers off and she was still there. All I could do was call for my brother's name. For my brother's privacy, well, just call him Jake. I whispered while crying, "Jake, use your flashlight." I said this about 5 times while crying louder. He heard me on the sixth time and he woke up and grabbed his flashlight. That's when she vanished and my dog woke up. I was still scared and crying. I told my brother what happened and I still went to school. When I came back, I told my mom, and what she told me still chills me to the bones. She said a woman had died in our house. She used to live here with her son. When she died, her son moved away and my mom rented this house. I'm no longer comfortable being in this house.
Can a mirror lie? My name isn't important, but what's important is that man. I am a 15-year-old male who became interested in spells at 13. I have spent the whole time between those ages experimenting with spells. Most turned out to be summoning and others were curses. I devoted nearly a month trying to cast a curse on someone I wasn't particularly fond of. It succeeded, but that same night I saw a man. He was dressed in the pitch-black trench coat and plague doctor's mask. He was only visible because of a slight glow coming from my charging phone. He didn't say a word, just stood and stared. I tried to ignore him by going to sleep, but the feeling of being watched became stronger. I walked to see him nearly a foot away from my face, breathing heavily. He then stood up and walked through the wall he was facing. That was my only encounter with him until about a month later. I was looking in the mirror after taking a shower. I saw him standing behind me. This time he spoke. "How do you continue?" I didn't think about answering the question until he demanded me to say. He angrily yelled, "Answer!" My only response was that I didn't know. I waited to see if he wanted anything else from me. He said nothing. I turned to leave and he was gone. I checked the mirror again, and he wasn't there either. Since then, I have perpetually felt like I was being watched. I have seen him on street corners, other seats in school and restaurants, and in the mirror as well. He continues to speak to me, but I never respond. For those getting interested in spellcasting, I would strongly advise against it.
Exorcism of Rolando. In the late 1940s in the United States, priests of the Roman Catholic Church performed a series of exorcisms on an anonymous boy, documented under pseudonym Rolando or Robbie Mannheim. The 14-year-old boy, born around 1935, was the alleged victim of demonic possession, and the events were recorded by the attending priest Raymond J. Bishop. Subsequent supernatural claims surrounding the events were used as elements in William Peter Blatty's novel The Exorcist in 1971. In mid-1949, several newspaper articles printed anonymous reports of an alleged possession and exorcism. The source of these reports is thought to be the family's former pastor, Luther Miles Schultz. According to one account, a total of 48 people witnessed the exorcism, 9 of them Jesuits. According to author Thomas B. Allen, Jesuit priest Father Wallet H. Halloran was one of the last surviving eyewitnesses of the event and participated in the exorcism. Allen wrote that diary kept by attending priest Father Raymond J. Bishop detailed the exorcism performed on the Rolando, aka Robbie. Speaking in 2013, Allen emphasized that definitive proof that the boy known only as Robbie was possessed by malevolent spirits is unattainable. Maybe he instead suffered from a mental illness or sexual abuse, or fabricated the entire experience. According to Allen, Heller has also experienced his skepticism about potential paranormal events before his death. When asked in an interview to make a statement on whether the boy had been possessed, Halloran responded saying, "No, I can't go on record. I never made an absolute statement about the things because I didn't feel I was qualified." Roland was born into a German Lutheran family. During the 1940s, the family lived in Cottage City, Maryland. But then he moved to South Africa. According to Allen, Roland was an only child and depended upon adults in his household for playmates, primarily his Aunt Harriet. His aunt, who was a spiritualist, introduced Roland to the Ouija board when he expressed interest in it. According to the Thomas B. Allen, after Aunt Hera's death, the family experienced strange noises, furniture moving on its own, and ordinary objects such as vases flying or levitating when the boy was nearby. The family turned to the Luther pastor Luther Miles Schultz for help. Long interested in parapsychology, Schultz arranged the boy to spend the night in his home in order to observe him. When parapsychologist J.B. Wren learned that Schultz claimed he witnessed household objects and furniture seemingly moving by themselves, Wren wondered if Schultz unconsciously exaggerated some of the facts. Schultz advised the boy's parents to see a Catholic priest. According to the traditional story, the boy then underwent a number of exorcisms. Edward Hughes, a Roman Catholic priest, conducted an exorcism on Roland at the Georgetown University Hospital at Jesuit Institute. During the exorcism, the boy allegedly slipped one of his hands out of the restraints, broke a bed spring from under the mattress, and used it as a weapon, slashing the priest's arm and resulting in the exorcism ritual being halted. The family traveled to St. Louis, where Roland's cousin contacted the bishop, who in turn spoke to William S. Bowdern, an associate of College Church. Bowdern was granted permission from the archbishop to perform another exorcism. Before the next exorcism ritual began, another priest, Walter Halloran, was called to the psychiatric wing of the hospital, where he was asked to assist Bowdern. William Van Roo, the third Jesuit priest, was also there to assist. Halloran stated that during the scene, words such as evil and hell, along with other various marks, appeared on the teenager's body. Allegedly, during the Litany of the Saints portion of the exorcism ritual, the boy's mattress began to shake. Moreover, Roland broke Halloran's nose during the process. In his 1993 book, Possessed, The True Story of an Exorcism, author Thomas B. Allen offered the consensus of today's experts that Robbie was just a deeply disturbed boy, nothing supernatural about him. Author Mark Obsasnik questions many of the supernatural claims associated with the story, proposing that Rolando was simply a spoiled, disturbed bully who threw deliberate tantrums to get attention or to get out of school. Obsesnik reported that Halloran, who was present at the exorcism, never heard that boy's voice change, and he thought that the boy merely mimicked Latin words he heard. Obsesnik reported that when marks were found on the boy's body, Halloran failed to check the boy's fingernails to see if he had made the marks himself. According to Obsesnik, individuals connected to the incident were influenced by their own specialization. To psychiatrists, Robdo suffered from mental illness. To priests, this was a case of demonic possession. To writers and film and video producers, this was a great story to exploit for profit. Obsesnik wrote that after he located and spoke with neighbors and childhood friends, he concluded that the boy had been a very clever trickster who had pulled pranks to frighten his mother and to fool children in the neighborhood. Skeptic John Nickel wrote that there was simply no credible evidence to suggest that the boy was possessed by demons or evil spirits, and maintains that the symptoms of possession can be childishly simple to fake. Nickel also dismissed stories of the boy's prodigious strength, saying he showed nothing more than what could be summoned by the agitated teenager. Two Christian academics, Terry D. Cooper, a professor of psychology, and Cindy K. Epperson, a professor of sociology, wrote that they believe that although they are not frequent, exorcisms are necessary for casting out the demonic, and cases of genuine possession cannot be explained by psychiatry. Cooper and Epperson devoted a chapter of their book, Evil, Satan, Sin and Psychology, to the case and dismissed natural explanation in favor of supernatural perspective regarding the nature of evil.
Deliver us from evil. Isn't it so scary to stumble on the dark side of things? This scary story isn't from me. This one is from my uncle. My tio is a pretty lovable guy in my family. He's been around with my mom since they were kids. Throughout his life he's been having the ups and downs, but he still managed to love us. I asked him about everything that happened to him in his life, since I was curious and interested. This scary run-in that he told me gives me chill to bone and leaves scared of what happened. In 1985, my tio worked for a cleaning company and he would clean carpets in people's houses in and around Santa Cruz. He would constantly go to the houses alone, which sucked for him. He said it wasn't the best job in the world. One day, my Tio got a phone call to go over and clean a house outside the Santa Cruz. His partner couldn't go with him because he had things to do. So he warned him about these private clubs up in the mountains around Santa Cruz, because he heard that in these exclusive clubs a lot strange and ominous things would happen. So this time my Tio went alone. Tio was very nervous and fearful going by himself. He drove up these winding roads that the redwood trees covered, with shadows under the canopy, even though it was going on in bright daylight. Tio was thinking about all the things that his colleagues said. He was getting more scared as he got closer to the destination. Once he arrived there was a massive gate that had security code that he had to punch it in to get in. The driveway was longer than the roads he was traveling on. Finally, at the long driveway there was a concrete lodge. The strange part was there was nobody there, not even cars. Tio got nervous when he went up to the front door. They were large wooden doors with very strange symbols and carving on them. It scared the shit out of him. But this part gives me a massive freezing chill in my body. When he entered the lodge, it was a massive hall with a stone altar in the very center with a few blood-red candles lit. There was no chairs, no decorations, just that stone altar sitting in the middle of the hall. He got a creepy feeling in his stomach. Tio said he would rather get fired than him ending up there. He ran back to the van and he floored out of there. After that he quit the job. The lodge members wanted him to go up there again. But a month after Tio quit it, he heard on the news the people who lived there were devil worshippers and did vampire rituals and would constantly lure people up to the lodge to do God knows what with them. The fact is that if my Tio wasn't aware of his surroundings, he would ended up as a sacrificial victim, and thank God he decided to get out of there. If it wasn't for that, I would never have seen him in my life. Arnaud Pavle was a Serbian hajduk who was believed to have become a vampire after his dad initiating an epidemic of supposed vampirism that killed at least 16 people in his native village of Medveđa, located at West Morava River in Trstenik, Serbia. Pavle's case became famous because of the direct involvement of the Austrian authorities and the documents by Austrian physicians and officers who confirmed the reality of vampires. Their report of the case was distributed in Western Europe and contributed to the spread of vampire belief among educated Europeans. According to the account of the Medveđa locals as it told there, Pavle was hajduk who had moved to the village from the Turkish-controlled part of Serbia. He reportedly often mentioned that he had been plagued by a vampire, but that he had cured himself by eating soil from the vampire's grave and smearing himself with his blood. About 1725 he broke his neck in a fall from a hay wagon. Within 20 or 30 days after Pavle's death, 4 people complained that they had been plagued by him. These people all died shortly thereafter. It was then remembered that Pavle has been tormented by a Turkish vampire. 10 days later and 40 days after Pavle's death, the villagers opened his grave. They saw that the corpse was undecomposed with all the indication of an arch-vampire. Concluding that Pavle was indeed a vampire, villagers drove a stake through his heart, to which he reacted by frightful shriek as if he were alive, groaning and bleeding. So villagers cut off his head and burned the whole body. They did the same to Pavle's 4 supposed victims to prevent them from becoming vampires as well. About 5 years later, in the winter of 1731, a new epidemic occurred with more than 10 people dying within several weeks, some of them in just 2 or 3 days without any previous illnesses. Report on the case stated that by 12 December, 13 people had died in the course of 6 weeks. According to other report, by the 7th of January, 17 people had died within a period of 3 months. The villagers complained of the new deaths to Schnetzer, the Austrian military commander in charge of the administration. The latter, fearing an epidemic of pestilence, sent for imperial infectious disease specialist military Dr. Glasser, who examined the villagers and their houses. He failed to find any signs of a contagious malady and blamed the deaths on the malnutrition common in the region. However, the villagers insisted that the illnesses were caused by vampires. At that moment, 2 or 3 households were gathering together at night, with some asleep and others on the watch. They were convinced that the deaths wouldn't stop unless the vampires were executed by the authorities, and threatened to abandon the village in order to save their lives if that wasn't done. Glasser consented to the exhumation of some of the deceased. To his surprise, he found that most of them were not decomposed, and many were swollen and had blood in their mouth. He outlined his findings in a report, recommending that the authorities should pacify the population by fulfilling its request to execute the vampires. On the 13th of February, Glasser's father, Austrian Dr. Johann Friedrich Glasser, who was also a correspondent to the Nuremberg Journal, sent its editors a letter describing the entire case as his son has written to him. The story aroused great interest. After that, reports and the letter were reprinted in a number of articles. They discovered at last, after much search, that Arnaud Pavle had killed not only 4 persons, but also several oxen, of which the new vampires has eaten. Upon these indications, they resolved to discinder all those who have died within a certain time. Amongst 40, 17 were found with all the most evident signs of vampirism. So they transfixed their hearts and cut off their heads also, then cast their ashes into the river. All the information and executions just mentioned were made in proper form and attested by several officers. My paranormal experience. I am a 16-year-old male and I used to be a bit skeptic to all things paranormal until one weekend at the abandoned house. To give some backstory, I was with my 2 best friends at the time, Delaney and Julia. We were home alone and bored at Delaney's house with nothing to do. I can't remember whose idea it was, but one of us had the idea to drive around some of the old dirt roads and check out abandoned buildings. There are a lot of abandoned places around where we live. It's pretty far out in the country, surrounded by either farms or woods. So we went to the first 2 old tobacco houses, took a few pictures and just sort of goofed off. We got back on the road and saw an old unkept driveway. Keep in mind, hardly anyone lives on this road. So we decided to drive down the driveway despite Julia saying we shouldn't because it didn't feel right to her. Not the fact that it would be trespassing, just that she had extremely bad vibes about that place. However, Delaney and I insisted. We drove down it and went pretty far back into the woods. This is where weird things started to happen. We parked the truck in a little clearing and noticed an abandoned house in the distance. However, before we got out of the truck, the front sensor went off beeping like crazy. Then so did the back one. It was as if someone was walking around the truck. The weird thing about this is we were parked in a clearing, so there was nothing to make the sensors go off. Even if they were, they would have gone off before we even parked the truck and wouldn't have just randomly go off in that order. Delaney and Julia were kind of freaked out, but I just ignored it. It was until later that this would freak me out too. We all got out of the truck and started walking towards the house. I was in front with my friends walking a decent distance behind me. If I'm honest, I was just showing off and acting fearless. I wasn't that scared until I saw her, a woman. A woman with dingy, unkempt looking hair in a colonial-style dress looking around the corner of the house. She looked at me and just put her finger up to her lips and shushed me very loudly. The feeling I had is almost indescribable. Imagine feeling as if all senses of safety and protection is gone and you don't feel at all happy. My heart felt like it stopped. I started crying. I was so scared. I knew she wasn't human. I don't know how, I just knew. I turned around to my friends and screamed "run" and started sprinting back to the truck. My phone flew out of my pocket about halfway back to the truck. My friend Julia told me this had happened and I told her to leave it. Now if you know me, you'd know I'm not ditching my phone, I'm serious. Julia's and Delaney's got back to the truck. We tried to open it but it was locked. Delaney's reached for her keys but they were gone, and so were Julia's phone. As if whatever that thing was trying to keep us there. Delaney ran back and picked up Julia's and iPhones and found her keys. We got in the truck and floored it out of there back to Delaney's house. You might think it's just coincidental. We dropped all of our things. But the thing is, our phones and Delaney's keys were all deep in our pockets, and it didn't make sense for them to just fall out on their own like that. Later, at the house, we were all talking about the entire situation, and I was explaining what I have seen. My friends didn't even hear the shush, nor did they see the woman. I was afraid they didn't believe me, but Julia reassured me. The look on my face and the tears were proof enough for her to run as well. We later found that there have been a few ghost sightings on that road by workers at Fort Pickett, a military facility nearby. The Candyman. Ronald Clark O'Brien, nicknamed the Candyman and the man who killed the Halloween, was an American man convicted of killing his 8-year-old son on Halloween 1974 with a potassium cyanide-laced pixie sticks that was collected during a trick-or-treat outing. O'Brien poisoned his son in order to claim life insurance money to ease his own financial troubles, as he was $100,000 in debt. O'Brien also distributed poison candy to his daughter and 3 other children in an attempt to cover up his crime. However, neither his daughter nor the other children ate the poisoned candy. He was convicted of capital murder in June 1975 and sentenced to death. He was executed by lethal injection in March 1984. On October 21, 1974, O'Brien took his 2 children trick-or-treating in Pasadena, Texas neighborhood. O'Brien's neighbor and his 2 children accompanied them. After visiting a home where the occupant failed to answer the door, the children grew impatient and ran ahead to the next home while O'Brien stayed behind. He eventually caught up with the group and produced 5 21-inch pixie sticks, which he would later claim he was given from the occupant of the house that had not answered the door. At the end of the evening, O'Brien gave each of his neighbor's 2 children a pixie sticks, and 1 each to Timothy and Elizabeth. Upon returning home, O'Brien gave the 5th pixie sticks to a 10-year-old boy whom he recognized from his church. Before bed, Timothy asked to eat some of the candy he collected, choosing the pixie sticks. Timothy had trouble getting the powdered candy out of the straw, so O'Brien helped him loosen the powder. After tasting the candy, Timothy complained that it tastes bitter. O'Brien then gave his son Kool-Aid to wash away the taste. Timothy immediately began to complain that his stomach hurts and ran to the bathroom when he began vomiting. O'Brien later claimed that he held Timothy while he was vomiting and the child went limp in his arms. Timothy O'Brien died en route to the hospital less than an hour after consuming the candy. Timothy's death from poisoned Halloween candy prompted the fear in the community. Numerous parents in Deer Park and the surrounding areas returned candy their children acquired from the trick-or-treating to police, fearing it was laced with poison. Police did not initially suspect O'Brien of any wrongdoing until Timothy's autopsy revealed that the pixie sticks he consumed was laced with a fatal dose of potassium cyanide. 4 of the 5 pixie sticks O'Brien claimed to receive were recovered by authorities from the other children, none of whom had consumed the candy. The parents of the 5th child became hysterical when they could not locate the candy upon police calling their house to inform them. The parents rushed upstairs to find their son asleep, holding the unconsumed poisoned candy. The boy had been unable to open the staples that sealed the wrapper shut. All 5 of pixie sticks has been opened with the top 2 inches, refilled with cyanide powder and were resealed with a staple. According to pathologists who tested the pixie sticks, the candy consumed by Timothy contained enough cyanide to kill 2 adults, where the other 4 candies contained dosage that could kill 3 or 4 adults. O'Brien initially told the police that he could not remember which house he got the pixie sticks from. Police became suspicious of his excuses because O'Brien and his neighbor had only taken their children to homes on 2 streets because it has been raining. Their suspicion increased after learning that none of the homes they visited had given out pixie sticks. After walking the neighborhood with police 3 times, O'Brien led them to the home that the group visited but whose occupant did not answer the door. O'Brien claimed that he revisited the home before catching up with the group. He said the owner of the home did not turn the lights on, but cracked the door open and handed him 5 pixie sticks. He claimed to have seen only the man's arm, which he is described as hairy. The home was owned by a man named Courtney Melvin. Melvin was an air traffic controller and did not get home from work until 11 p.m. on Halloween night. Police ruled Melvin out as suspect when nearly 200 people confirmed that Melvin was at work. As their investigation furthered, police learned that Ronald O'Brien was over $100,000 in debt and had a history of being unable to hold a job. In the 10 years preceding the crime, O'Brien held 21 jobs. Time of his arrest, he was suspected of theft at his job at Texas State Optical and was close to being fired. His car was about to be repossessed. He had defaulted on several bank loans and had the family home foreclosed on. Police discovered that O'Brien had taken out life insurance policies on his children in the month preceding Timothy's death. In January 1946, he had taken out 10,000 life insurance policies on both of his children. 1 month before Timothy's death, O'Brien took out additional 20,000 policies on both children, despite the objections of his life insurance agency. In the days preceding Timothy's death, O'Brien has taken out yet another 20,000 policy on each child. The various policies totaled approximately 60,000. O'Brien's wife mentioned that she did not know about the insurance policies on her children's lives. Police also learned that on the morning after Timothy's death, O'Brien had called his insurance company to inquire about collecting the policies he had taken out on his son. After learning that O'Brien has visited a chemical supply store in Houston to buy cyanide shortly before Halloween 1974, police began to suspect that Ronald O'Brien killed his son. Police theorized that O'Brien has laced the candies with poison in order to kill his children to collect on their life insurance policies. They believed he gave the other children the candy in an effort to cover up his crime. The other children never consumed the candy. Police repeatedly questioned O'Brien, but he maintained his innocence. Although police never discovered when or where O'Brien bought the poison, he was arrested for Timothy's murder on November 5, 1974. He was indicted on 1 count of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. O'Brien entered a plea of not guilty to all 5 counts. O'Brien's trial began in Houston on May 5, 1975. During the trial, a chemist who was acquainted with O'Brien testified that in summer of 1973, O'Brien contacted him asking about cyanide and how much would be fatal. A chemical supply salesman also testified that O'Brien has asked him how to purchase cyanide. Friends and co-workers testified that in the month before Timothy's death, O'Brien showed an unusual interest in cyanide and spoke about how much it would take to kill a person. O'Brien's sister-in-law and brother-in-law testified that on the day of the Timothy's funeral, he spoke of using the money from Timothy's insurance policy to take a long vacation and buy other items. O'Brien continued to maintain his innocence. His defense mainly drew upon the decades-old urban legend concerning a mad poisoner who hands out Halloween candy laced with the poison, or needles or candy apples with razor blades inserted. These stories have persisted despite the fact that there are no documented instances of strangers poisoning Halloween candy. The case and subsequent trial generated national attention, and the press dubbed O'Brien the Candyman. On June 3, 1975, a jury took 46 minutes to find O'Brien guilty of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. The jury took 71 minutes to sentence him to death.